I go to work for a paycheck, but I also go to work for a purpose, and I want to feel like I'm valued, seen, and recognized.
Welcome back to the TroopHR podcast. I'm your host, Taylor Bradley. Today we're joined with someone who's no stranger to the podcast, and that is Mita Mallick, who is back with us today to talk about her new book. She's a best-selling author and one of our very first guests from season 1, and I'm thrilled to have her return. This time, she's diving into her new book that caught my attention from the title alone. The Devil Emails at Midnight. It's a bold and funny, yet honest look at leadership through the lens of bad bosses. And not just the ones that we've worked for, but the kind that we might accidentally become ourselves. Before we dive into the archetypes and awkward truths, I want to start with something foundational. Because to understand what makes someone a bad boss, we first have to be clear on what great leadership really looks like.
I love that question. I'm going to pull from some memories of some of the best bosses I've ever had, Taylor. Saying please and thank you. We forget that, right? Is this what we're teaching our children? We're taught as children, please, thank you, gratitude, coaching through mistakes, not kicking someone when they're down, teaching them, onboarding them appropriately, letting them step into the spotlight, giving them credit for their work. And I say, Taylor, when you love someone, you let them go. And so when you really care about your people, and Taylor's on my team and he's just doing so well and he's up for that next great promotion, I let him go. I don't talent hoard and hold him back. So I don't know, this book that we'll talk about is about bad bosses, and our conversation today is about bad bosses, but really bad bosses help us think about what good leaders and great leaders should be and look like. And I just have a lot of great memories of good leaders I've worked for.
You're sparking memories in my mind as well. I love the talent hoarding comment. I've never heard it positioned that way, but I had a mentor that basically let me go in order for me to go on to the next journey. And I deeply appreciated him doing that. So
I love that. And you'll be surprised. We'll get into it. Not many bosses do that always.
That's true. That's true. So let's start with the book and the premise. Can you give us a TLDR of the book and what got you to write about this topic?
Yes, the book is called The Devil Emails at Midnight, What Good Leaders Can Learn from Bad Bosses. And the genesis of the book is a few years ago, Taylor, my mother's home was flooded and destroyed. It has been rebuilt since then. But if anyone's been into a soaked home ever, you were frantically trying to save things. So here I am in my childhood bedroom. I find spelling bee certificates, report cards, articles I had written from high school. And guess what else I find? I find a notebook from my 20s, because I love a good notebook even to this day. And I had listed several bad bosses I had had with descriptions of them. And it reminded me of Mean Girls and like a burn book. And I look at this, and if you followed my writing and follow some of the things I talk about in social media, I do talk about how to survive a toxic workplace, how to survive that bad boss. But then, Taylor, I thought, what if I'm a bad boss? What if I have been in someone's notebook? And I know I have been a bad boss. So that was the genesis of the book. I started to think about what sort of bad bosses have I encountered in my career and what lessons could be learned from them. And I also include myself in the book, but I go through 13 different archetypes of bad bosses. And there's more than 13, but for the purposes of the book, I stuck to my lucky number 13.
I'm already taking notes, and you're making me nervous that I have to checklist myself here in a few minutes, but I love the title. And before sharing what stuck out to me about it, I'm curious, how did you arrive at that title?
Well, The Devil Emails at Midnight opens with the following chapter, which I'll read to you. The boss who never had time for us except at midnight. And this was my encounters with one of my first bosses in corporate America. And I was so excited, Taylor, to be at this company, to be working for her. And she just wasn't as excited. So the only time she would make time for me was between the hours of 10 p.m. and around 1 a.m. when she would dump out her inbox. And so I was like a golden retriever chasing around in the office, trying to get time with her. I have a story of like, I even chased her into the parking lot and like watched her drive away because I wanted time with her, right? anytime I could get with her, and she just didn't have time for me. And what's the biggest complaint in any relationship? You don't have enough time for me, and time is such a precious commodity. And so that is actually the inspiration for the title of the book. And I start with that opening chapter.
All right. To open my vulnerability, that was something that I became aware of that I was doing, is pinging people outside of normal working hours, and had to make modifications to that and be very diligent on both not pinging people at midnight. I don't know if I was at midnight, but outside normal hours, and also making sure I had boundaries myself, but different podcast, different time. So how do we stop ourselves from being that manager that is reaching out to folks outside of normal working hours, putting pressure on folks in that way?
And so I do want to set the context. I get this question a lot. We're working in a global environment. So my midnight is different than your midnight. So let's put that aside. It is just about you emailing at really sort of off hours, right? And so I ask and coach people to think about, why are you doing this? Like, if you are not a firefighter, a 911 operator, a ER doctor, think about things that are really critical and life or death situations. Is sending that email a life or death situation at midnight, right? Because if something was happening that you needed someone that desperately, you would probably call them, right? That would be what happened. And so the question I ask myself, I have been guilty. I have been that boss who has emailed at midnight as well. And what is it that is causing you to send that email? Can you hold on it? Is it more that I just want to dump it out of my inbox and get it to Taylor? Can I think about, can I call him in the morning? Can we talk about it live? Why is it that I'm resorting to email? And so it's really thinking about the ways we communicate, and can I give him that time in person instead, which is what he might be craving, right? You know, Taylor, when I think about this idea of emailing at midnight, I was doing a talk recently in a very large company. And after the talk about the book, I get off stage and a leader comes up to me and he says, "Oh, I love the idea of your book and your talk was great. And I don't email at midnight. I save all my drafts and I send them in the morning." And I said, "Okay, so if I work for you, do I log in at 8:30 in the morning and then get like a barrage of 30 emails from you?" And you could see the light bulb go off. And he was like, "Huh." I mean, it's sort of the same principle, right? You're saving all of it. And then all of a sudden, Mita gets a barrage of emails. And why? Why is that necessary to do?
That's a great balance. And again, to be open for the listeners, I went through a similar iteration of, I would not save them in my inbox. That was probably even more clever, but I would Slack myself because I went through this phase where, when I became aware I was doing this, I would message someone and say, "Mita, you do not need to respond this weekend to this. This can wait till Monday. Then here's the thing." But then you generally know that someone's going to respond back because you're the manager, right?
The power.
Yeah. And so being aware of that dynamic was an eye-opening part for me. I don't know if I was self-aware of like the barrage concept, but it was something where I put it on my list and then went, does this actually need to be addressed on Monday? Can this wait till a one-on-one? Can it wait to the project meeting? And so that was eye-opening for me. And I will say, I used to be a firefighter.
Oh,
then when we were off shift, we didn't get emails. So like, there's still,
here we go.
And
there we go. I love that, Taylor. I did not know that about you.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yes.
So what are the moments when we might find ourselves creeping into this bad boss territory?
Yeah. So as I was putting together the book and researching, I was thinking about 3 moments that I kept observing coming up. Number one, something's happening in the marketplace. Maybe today, right? Depending on, when you're listening to this, there's always something happening in the markets that's impacting your company. So that's causing stress, bad boss behavior. Number 2, your boss is going through something. Most people have a boss if you're working in a corporate structure. And so that, as my children will say, poo-poo trickles down. It trickles down, right? So that stress then you're taking on. And then the other third area would be something is happening in your career and or something is happening in your home life that you're bringing to work. And so I think about those moments when you're emailing at midnight or off hours, there's stress and anxiety that you may be channeling into, the one thing you can control. And as we saw in the pandemic, the rise of the helicopter manager. Why was that? Because we couldn't control all the loss and grief that was happening around us, but I could control when I sent Taylor that Slack. I could control watching to see if he was online and micromanaging because I was like, oh, wow, now I feel this sense of control back. And so typically those are 3 moments where we might see any one of us slipping into bad boss territory.
I've never thought of it in the pandemic as that was something people controlling, but we saw that rise in the software that was monitoring people's mouse moves. And I'm just like, goodness, if you're at that point of not trusting someone, you've hired the wrong person.
Absolutely.
Right? Or there might be some self-reflection, certainly. That's an area that I often see with emerging managers, where that's just something that maybe they grew up with a bad manager, so they think that's good management.
Yes, we inherit it because we don't know what good leadership looks like. If you've worked for someone who's a micromanager for a long time, you might start to exhibit those behaviors. I certainly did, and I talk about that in the double emails at midnight.
And as we creep into this area, I'll go back to my firefighter paramedic days. We always talk about signs and symptoms of different things to give us a clue of what was happening. So what do you think are the most common bad boss behaviors that we may not talk about as often?
I love that question. One of the behaviors I cover is spewing toxic positivity. And this is really important in situations when markets are in turmoil, the company is under a lot of stress. And so what do I mean by that? I share a story of a boss I once worked for, beloved. He was like the corporate Pied Piper. We would follow him anywhere. He was a lot of the things we talked about when you asked me what makes a good boss, right? Great coach, great cheerleader, just really enjoyed being with his team and spending time with them. But he also was like a walking Instagram reel. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. You're superwoman. You can do this. I have faith in you. And in the book, I share the story of we have this innovation Taylor that's going gangbusters. It is selling so well. Everyone's really excited about it. And guess what? Supply chain tells us that we can no longer produce the product because this ingredient is no longer available. So we're going to be delayed for a while. But he's so excited, he adds $1 million to the forecast. And he says, we can do it. You can do it. It's like, we can't do it. We can't make the product. And so fast forward in that story, I'm sitting in my performance review. And guess what's happened? I get dinged for my merit, dinged for my bonus, a bonus that will barely cover my Starbucks addiction, because he says, well, you missed the $1 million forecast. I was like, but we all told you. Am I like in a parallel universe? We're having this conversation. We told you that, like, everyone told you we couldn't produce the product, and you forced us to increase our target. And of course we missed it. And so really being careful of, are you being toxically positive, or are you setting realistic, optimistic, and inspiring goals for your team, and the balance of those things?
The really interesting thing that stuck out to me from all of that, and maybe I'm just like extrapolating the conversation a little bit, but it seems, going back to what I think you said your toddler, your kids said, is like poo-poo rolls downhill. Yeah. I could tell you as a father of a 1-year-old, it does, for the record. But there's also this thing where I had a boss tell me once, listen, if your manager is taking credit for your work, then you're doing something right. And I'm curious how you feel about that approach.
If your manager is taking credit for your work, you're doing something right. Listen, I actually think that is part of how we were trained, and that is part of what you do. It's like, I work for Taylor, I shine, Taylor shines. But at the same time, if the manager is taking all the credit and the disproportionate amount of credit, I talk about that in the double emails at midnight, then what does that do in my performance review time? No one ever said to me in a performance review, the team did a great job, Mita, so you're going to get that top rating. Yeah, of course, if you're responsible for teams, it's part of your rating and review, but it is really about what's the individual impact you made. And so I do think there's a balance there, and really good leaders will share the spotlight, right? Of course, the leader will get the credit and also should share the spotlight. And if they're a really good leader, the result would have happened without them, right? Because they're a great coach.
Then flipping that a little bit is, I have the privilege to work with some great managers and leaders that report into me. What are ways that I, as a manager of managers, can ensure that they're emulating what you feel is a good boss? What are some tests or signs, symptoms that I should be looking out for, or ways to coach them?
Mm. I would start with something easy, skip level meetings, particularly as you rise in your career and you have managers reporting into managers. Take the time to get to know people who are within your organization. I'm not saying you meet with them once a week, but certainly you could do a coffee a quarter or a Zoom or twice a year. Another thing that I like to do, and this is like a real practical tip, is if you have a staff meeting once a week, you have a quarterly gathering, ask people to just share one thing they're working on that they're proud of and keep it really simple. No slides, no proposal, no deck, but just meet up. We're going to go around the room. And so then you, Taylor, as the person leading the team, gets a sense of who's working on what. And guess what? I go to work for a paycheck, but I also go to work for a purpose. And I want to feel like I'm valued, seen, and recognized. Bosses make or break inclusion. And the worst moments in my career, Taylor, has been when I've been at work and I'm like, does anyone even know that I'm here? Some of that's on me, some of that's on management, but understanding what people are working on and giving them credit, that's like the biggest retention tool. The biggest retention tool and why people will stay is that they feel valued.
The folks that may feel unseen or undervalued by their manager, what advice do you have for them?
Two parts. One, to do some self-reflection. And I've been there where it's like, oh, this company's taking advantage of me. My boss doesn't like me. They don't give me opportunities. Okay, so self-reflect, Mita. What are you doing in this equation? So what can you be doing to sort of repair the relationship, extend an olive branch, raise your hand for opportunities, want to be part of some bigger initiatives and ask. At the same time, if you've tried that and the relationship isn't working, then you vote with your feet and start to look for other opportunities, whether it's internal or external. Because the other thing I talk about in the devil emails at midnight is there's nothing like a disengaged employee leader staying to really poison the culture, right? And so we've all been there. If you start to do that downward spiral and you can't get yourself out of it, it's probably time to look for a next opportunity if you can't reset in that moment at work.
Now, I find this hard to believe, for the record, but in the end of your book, you talk about how you were a bad boss.
Okay, yes.
What did you learn from that experience and how did you grow from it?
So I lost my dad suddenly in 2017, and it was unexpected. And when I went back to work, two things happened. One, I felt this need to get over my dad's death, which if anyone has gone through a grieving journey, I'm still grieving him, how many years later? That's not how it works. But the culture at the time, too, was such that my boss said to me at the time, oh, you finally got your mojo back. People didn't want to see you sad and didn't want to see you upset. And so I was pushing those feelings down, but eventually they come out. I did a lot of the things that I talk about bad bosses shouldn't do. I lost my temper. I was disengaged. I was a micromanager. You talk about that emailing at midnight. I would do that then because I couldn't sleep. And I thought, well, I might as well be productive. So let me fire off some emails at 2 a.m., 3 a.m. to my team, right? And so a lot of what I talk about is creating a culture where we do allow for bereavement leave and we do support each other in the workplace because it's a club no one wants to be a part of. We're all going to lose someone we love and it's inevitable. So how do we show up and support each other? But I had, as I share in the book, a story of somebody who resigned from my team who I really loved and we worked well together. But at that time, I had just gone from a really good leader to a bad boss. And so a lot of lessons learned there.
And for that, we are deeply thankful for your vulnerability to share that because that's how we all grow. And to end, I had two final questions for you. So
Sure.
One, I do think that over my career, I've noticed that Hollywood tends to influence a lot of the way that people operate.
Sure. Yeah.
And I'm curious if there is a boss from a movie that you look at and go, that set us back. Who is that fictional boss that you see?
Oh, God. Well, I love The Devil Wears Prada. I mean, that's obviously inspiration for the title of this book a bit. But I do think, the bosses who are throwing things. I mean, that's one example. Throwing things, the bully, the temper tantrums. Like, you're like, how is this allowed in a workplace? I talk about this. I have a boss who I nicknamed Medusa. She's in the Devil Emails at midnight. she threw a Chanel shoe at my colleague and I, which missed us. But you're like, how is this behavior allowed in the workplace? And that was the first time in my life, Taylor, no one had ever screamed at me. Not my parents, not my husband, not my brother, not my friends. And here I am at a workplace being shouted at and screamed at. And you're like, no. And so I think glamorizing that behavior, while it's fun to watch on screen, it is really horrible when you're in that situation at work.
Yes. Yeah. And The Devil Wears Prada is my wife's favorite movie. And Miranda, right?
Yes.
I think when you see that, I've seen that. Unfortunately, I've seen it over my career, similar to you. People feel like they need to treat an EA a certain way and
Yes.
that type of thing. And it just all comes back to one of the biggest things I've taken from my paramedic career into HR is we are all human. And on the grief part too, is grief manifests itself in very unique ways. And so keeping an eye on that type of stuff is incredibly important as people leaders.
Yeah.
So final question, which I think will be the easiest and my highly recommended one. Listeners that want to get the book or get in contact with you, how do we do that?
Please go get a copy on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, your local independent bookstore. It's called The Devil Emails at Midnight, What Good Leaders Can Learn from Bad Bosses. Drops September 30th, and you can find me on LinkedIn.
Mita, thank you for being on the podcast, and we will put a link in the description for you.
Thank you, Taylor. I so appreciate you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the TroopHR podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, we encourage you to subscribe and leave a 5-star rating. If you would like to learn more about our community, please visit TroopHR.com. In the meantime, keep living the dream.